the Q&A section. Let me type that in. Now, this is going to be the questions and answers that I put on social. That I wanted to get a couple of questions from socials. People are just thinking about basketball. I just said NBA topics, and people threw some things out there that I'm going to answer. Of course, if I get any comments here in the chat box, I will also answer those as well. So give me one moment. Let me pull up my questions here. Manuel from Sit and Talk. Is Brad going to match offers for Grant Williams? There's been reportedly that Orlando Magic are interested in signing Grant Williams, which I would expect would be a team that would look at him. It depends on the money, right? Because, of course, you're going to have this Jaylen Brown extension at some point over the offseason or into early next season. Are you going to – when is that going to happen? You kind of have to plan and figure out what you're doing with the rest of the roster. I think if it's anything over $12, $13 million a year, that they're probably not going to match, probably look to do a sign and trade at some point if that's possible, throwing Payton Pritchard. It depends on the threshold here. Anything over $12 million, I don't think they're going to try to match it. I think they figured out, especially with the benching of Grant Williams, which was I questioned as well, was that going to be a smart move? I do not think so. So looking at that, it depends on the threshold there. If it's at $12 million, I do not think so. Moving on, Lester from Sit and Talk. Also, is the new CBA good for the league? I believe he said Supermax as well, especially with the Jaylen Brown question and stuff like that. So after further review, I believe the luxury tax is $5 million or something to that nature. And then it goes the second apron where there's a cap on what teams can do in terms of expanding the roster. I think it's at $17.5 million for every dollar that they're over or something like that, or every threshold that they hit. What that does when they hit the second apron is that, one, you don't have the mid-level exception to sign free agents, right? You don't have that mid-level exception. Guys are going to have to take the minimum in that situation, which I think will deter a lot of guys from going to those teams, especially if the bread is not right. Depends on where they are in their career, as well as they're not able to trade future-round picks, first-round picks. I don't think you can go 5 years into the future or some crap like that. Like we've seen the Paul George trade do. We've seen the Rockets do. We've seen the Miami Heat do. Various teams, the Dallas Mavericks, of course, trading multiple picks. If they're over that threshold, they're not able to trade there. And they're going to only be able to offer the minimum. It limits what teams who are overspending do. Now, with that being said, I believe the new NBA TV deal comes in 2024, 2025. So that's a year away. And I think it's 24-25 season. So I think in the short term, it can make some teams scramble, right? So I think that there's going to be, I think the days of those guys, remember, of course, with the last one that happened with the cap hitting up, where guys like Evan Turner, Alfredo Camino, guys of that nature, those mid-card guys getting those high max salaries that we saw Otto Porter Jr. potentially getting $20 million a year, those days are probably over where guys are getting money just because of the money there. Now, do I think that teams are going to try to figure out a way to maybe sign a guy a little bit for more to maybe potentially set up a sign and trade potentially so things can work? Yes, that's going to happen. But in terms of the long term, it kind of reminded me of the first lockout in '99 for the NBA, right? Where guys like Stephon Marbury was like, yo, I got to get out of here because with this new cap, I can't get paid like Kevin Garnett. And that's where he went out and got traded to New Jersey, I believe, or New Jersey, right? So you're sitting there looking at it that way where you're like, okay, guys are going to be moving. This Jaylen Brown situation for the Celtics could be a problem that could be there lingering. But I think with the new NBA TV deal that's lingering in 2 years, I think that's going to impact the CBA more than anything else and get it back to where we are right now before previously, where it's not going to be like people are worried about the CBA now being basically, oh, you're going to have two guys that you can go to or one guy and a bunch of role players, a bunch of good guys and a bunch of starters, and that's going to create balance throughout the league. potentially, yes, that can do it for 1 or 2 seasons, but long term, I think with the NBA TV deal, those tax thresholds are going to go up. Those the salary cap is definitely going to go up without as much money as Adam Silver is saying is going through streaming. Watching the game, just look at the playoffs. If you look at the reports, people are watching the NBA, so I don't think the money is only going to get bigger. So as for 1 point for a year or two, maybe the salary cap is going to the CBA. The salary cap is going to affect certain teams, especially those higher paying teams like the Celtics, like the Warriors, like the Clippers, and various other teams that is going to affect, right? And there's all those potentials with, I think, the rookie deals are not going to be max in 5 years. I think it's only going to be a 4-year max with a 5-year option, but it doesn't have to be the max. I think that's going to basically another thing that saves the owner from themselves, right? We look at the Zion situation right now, and seeing things of that nature, and it's like, okay, what is happening here in terms these teams that are signing guys to all these deals and it's not paying out. So I think that's a little thing that's trying to save owners from themselves. But I think with the CBA going up, I think with the CBA coming in, the new TV deal potentially coming in, that it will get better. I think it will. Moving on here, Cal Jr. asked, who did the Knicks move to improve their roster, Barrett or Randall? And obviously to me, it's going to be Barrett because I think Julius Randle has shown that he is a capable scorer. He's a capable rebounder. He can pass the ball and facilitate. But you can see his play style for a place where you think New York is, where you think there's a lot of, calling for his play style. Efficient scoring inside and shooting the balls when he's not doing those things. And especially I think RJ Barrett is the better potential upside, even if a young team is willing to take a swing on him. Julius Randle recently just had ankle surgery, so he already had that foot injury that was happening. He has that ankle injury happening on. It's going to be difficult for those guys to turn around and do that. I just don't think that's going to be a feasible option for the New York Knicks as they thought it was on that end, where they thought they were going to get as much as they want for get as much as they thought they would for Julius Randle. I just don't think that's on the table anymore like they thought it would be. Yeah, that's just not going to happen. So moving on from that, going on to Courtney Sanders here. He says, how will the Grizzlies survive without Ja? And one of the better teams in the league that have been built to do that over the past couple of years have been the Memphis Grizzlies. I think they're going to be okay without Ja for a little bit, depending on the suspension and how long that is. Recently, his camp is saying that it was a toy gun. I don't know how that's going to go over, but the Memphis Grizzlies have been able to survive without Ja Morant for the most part, right? Like, they've been able to go on stretches without him and survive. They have been able to do that. I think the emergence of Jaren Jackson Jr. over that point in time, over last year, he's really coming to his own. If he can just stay on the floor and not foul, they can still have Desmond Bane. They have various guys, Brandon Clark coming back, Steven Adams, Xavier Tillman, guys of that nature, Tyrus Jones, all these guys that play for them, they are going to come together and figure it out. And I think their coach is good enough to figure it out. Moving on, Courtney Sanders again. Everyone talking about breaking up the Jays. Why isn't anybody talking about breaking up Paul George and Kawhi Leonard? And I think everybody comes into the agreement if those guys are healthy, and it's just the way that we've seen it, right? Like, if Kawhi and Paul George are healthy, your team is going to win. I think they're over 500 when they play together, even though it's not as many games. They win basketball games. They are effective. And especially the allure of Kawhi Leonard, 1, winning a championship with the Spurs, 2, winning a championship with Toronto, being that guy going forward. We have seen Kawhi Leonard do that. And the allure of Kawhi Leonard when he plays, we even seen it in the playoffs, when he plays, everything looks great. Paul George, same thing. When he plays, everything looks great. Unfortunately, in the playoffs, we have just not been able to see those guys together and playing well, right? But when we look at everyone saying break up the Jays, multiple Eastern Conference Finals appearance and a Finals appearance last year, Eastern Conference Finals appearance this year, people are saying they're not working, they're not sticking together, whatever the case may be, despite the winning record, despite everything that they're doing. So it is puzzling to see why people are saying break up the Jays and no one's saying anything about Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Stephen A. Smith is the only person I've heard come out and say Kawhi Leonard needs to retire. He said he needs to retire. That's the only person I saw really go at Kawhi Leonard and say, yo, this guy's not available. He needs to retire, whatever the case may be. But he's the only guy that I've seen criticize Kawhi Leonard openly like that to that point. Looking at it from the standpoint of them breaking up, the Clippers really don't have really much options, especially in the Paul George trade, to do anything but a sign and trade. Maybe you can get a team to possibly convince themselves of Kawhi Leonard. All that injury-prone stuff is very difficult from that standpoint. Looking at Paul George and where his situation is, same thing. Injury-prone is going to be hard to trade those guys, so they're kind of stuck with him at least for the short term until they figure out what they need to do. But, yep, something needs to happen with the LA Clippers. Moving on, Jamal said the Portland situation. I believe that's the Dame Lillard situation, especially if he wants to get traded or not. And I've already made a video about that where I think it's time for them to trade him. I think they need to trade him, move on from him, have that third-round pick, draft Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson, whoever's available, and rebuild. You still have Shaedon Sharpe. You still have Anthony Simons. Move the rest of the guys off the roster. They still have capable guys like Jeremy Grant and Yusuf Nurkic, guys that can have some type of value to bring back more assets, bring back contracts, bring back younger guys. Dame situation, looked around the league outside of New York. You don't want to. New York already has Jalen Brunson. You can't put them together. Philadelphia is an option, depending on what's there. If James Harden is still there, if they can figure out a way to trade Dame Lillard to Philly, that would be awesome. Also, Miami. I don't think anybody would want Tyler Hero, unfortunately, in what they have, especially if I'm Portland. I'm looking to get assets back. Also, looking at a spot I thought would be a good spot, especially where Portland can get back young assets and maybe a draft pick, a couple draft picks, is Orlando. I think Jonathan Isaacs can be traded. I think Jalen Suggs, depending on who you draft, could be a nice addition there. But you have Jonathan Isaac, who can be a front man up front and figure out something there and figure out what bigs can we get from Orlando. But does Dame want to go to Orlando? Probably not. Dame has been 10 toes down in Portland, not ready to leave. He's going to stay there. I don't see him leaving there. But I do think it's time for them to trade him. I do think. As well as the situation with the owner where I believe Paul Allen's sister or whatever it is, his sister is refusing to sell to Paul Knight, who was in heads with Nike. He's one of the founders of Nike and stuff like that. I think that's disappointing because I think there's a guy that wants to, one, own the Portland Trailblazers. That's one. Two, he's from the area, Portland, Oregon, Nike's headquarters. Why wouldn't you do that? And is that a situation where they want to trade? He comes in and he trades Dame? So what? I think it's time for them to trade Dame. I think it's time for them to sell the team. If they're not going to try to build around Damian Lillard, which they have not done in his 11-year career. They've had moments, but they have failed to continuously build around Damian Lillard, and I cannot sit there and continue to watch that. Like, they need to rebuild, and especially the potential that you can possibly have with Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe. That is a highlight factory, at least. You know, you got two guys that are going to show up to work. If it's a Brandon Miller, you have a wing combo where the league is built on wings. You look around the league, Jimmy Butler, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Anthony Edwards, all these guys variously around the league. You can sit there and trade Damian Lillard and start a rebuild. You don't have to continue to sit there. And as I said on my Portland Trailblazers video, it doesn't have to be a situation where it's a Jerry Jones, Terrell Owens situation. It doesn't have to be he takes a tablecloth out, circles a white circle and crosses it down and says, this is where we part ways. It doesn't have to be like that. Like, this should be easy for everybody and understand, hey, we tried it. We tried it for a good, 10 years, a decade, and it didn't work. And that's fine. And it's time to move on from that situation. I believe Dame needs to get out of there. He's too much of a talent in Portland, and especially in that small market where he can't bring anybody in 10 years, you haven't gotten anybody. And that's the facts of it. Like when LeBron was in Cleveland for those 10 years when he wasn't winning, nobody came. Right? He had 37-year-old Shaq. Other guys were not coming to Cleveland. So Damian Lillard, who's in Portland, who's on the West Coast, it's not LA, even though it's close to there, close to Vancouver, close to Vegas, close to Texas. It's like you at least have that there. But unfortunately for them, he can't do it. He can't do it in Portland. I just don't think so. CJ left. That was the breakdown of it all. And I'm just like, yo, it's time. And that's okay. The Portland situation, they need to sell the team. They need to trade Dame and start a rebuild. Moving on to main topic, he had a bunch of questions there, which I'm going to answer. This was written, of course, yesterday. Is Miami better than people think? Of course they are. It's heat culture. Like that's the one thing that we've seen with Miami, that's the ability to just continuously reinvent themselves. They were not a 3-point shooting team. All of a sudden they're shooting 3-pointers. They are not they're eighth seed who people were saying we're going to get out of the first round, out in the second round, out in the third round, and they are still here. They're like a cockroach that won't die, right? Like even when you turn the lights on, they don't run away. They're still there. They're thug cockroaches. They're thug cockroaches. That's how I describe the Miami Heat. They do not go away. They stay around. They just constantly, continuously a thorn in the side. And especially as a Celtics fan, they've been a thorn in the Celtics side for the past couple of years. They're not going away. They're going to find a way to reinvent themselves. And especially if they do get Damian Lillard or any potential star to go there and play with Jimmy Butler, it's going to get interesting for them. Moving on, is Nikola Jokic the best player in the league? For the past couple of years, I've been saying Giannis. I'm still going to lean Giannis. Basically because Giannis's impact on both sides of the floor. I think the level of Joker offensively, I think he's tops in the league. The ability to get it done on 3 different levels, the post, the mid-range, and the 3-point shot. I think that his ability to score from all 3 levels, facilitate the way he does, rebound, and is a better defender. People are going to say he's not a great defender, but he has gotten better in that regard for what's needed in the NBA as a big man to at least battle. I think we got to start leaning towards him, right? Like Kevin Durant's injury prone. We see what happened with him when he can get inefficient. LeBron James is far from that for the past couple of years. He's not that level of player anymore. Anthony Davis flirts with it when he wants to, when he's healthy and can actually go. Joel Embiid, who won MVP, is obviously in the conversation. I think he's dominant enough on both sides of the ball. But right now, especially with this playoff run, it's got to be Joker, right? Like Giannis is not that guy the past 2 years, right? He's not. Against Boston last year, we've seen him struggle. Against coming back in this series against Miami, we've seen him actually be dominant, but not get the job done. Nikola Jokic right now has the wins. He has the stats, and he's moving on, right? Like he's in the finals, right? So we got to kind of give the edge to him. Moving on, is Eric Spoelstra, the best in the league? Now, forever, I'm going to say Pop. Greg Popovich in San Antonio. You give him some guys that can actually go. He has a couple of guys there down in San Antonio, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vessel, guys of that nature. He has something there, but not enough to win games. They have obviously tanking. Obviously have the first round draft pick in this year's draft. But looking at, and I'll get to the live chat, the live comments in a minute there. But in terms of what Eric Spoelstra has been able to do, and people have said, oh, he's a big 3 guy. He was able to succeed with those guys and win championships with those guys, and that's the reason why he's successful. And I never believed that, because even before LeBron James and Chris Bosh came to Miami, Eric Spoelstra was getting enough out of those guys. The second year when he was the coach, I believe the first year he was 44, 39 and lost to the Celtics. And then Dwayne Wade got hurt the next year and they won 17 games. So when you're looking at it from that standpoint of what Eric Spoelstra has been able to do, reinvent himself multiple times, being able to get to the playoffs, been able to get the most out of all these guys. Hassan Whiteside was a coveted guy in the league. James Johnson, another guy that was a highly touted guy in the league that people were going after. You look at guys like Caleb Martin, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero. This guy Highsmith that came out of nowhere and scored 18 in game one. The ability to get even Justice Winslow, the ability to get guys the maximum out of these guys, put them in the right positions on both sides, keep everyone involved, right? Like from the top to the bottom of their roster, he's utilizing them, getting them into the right spots, getting them into the right spaces to be successful on both ends of the floor. Even if they're not good defenders, he's like, yo, we're not going to put you in the area where you're alone. We're going to battle with you offensively. We're going to run plays for you. You're not just going to be out there and just be a decoy. We're actually going to run stuff for you and have you be effective. Eric Spoelstra is up there. Yeah, I think he's number 2, of course, behind Pop. But if anyone says he's number 1, I can't argue it. He's an 8th seed in the NBA Finals. It has been effectively out-coaching everyone for a couple of years now. It has been doing it with less talented team. No superstars, especially when people talk about Jimmy Butler or anything like that. And I can't speak enough about him. He's been awesome. Moving on to the next question, where does Jimmy Butler rank amongst the best players? Now, if this is all time, I have a running joke. If Jimmy Butler wins the NBA Finals, he's the 3rd greatest player on my list all time. And I'm going to argue anybody with it, and I don't care. You can get upset. I don't care. But in the league, Jimmy Butler is the top, during the regular season, top 15 NBA player. During the postseason, he becomes a top 5 player. And we don't know why, especially this postseason where he dismantled the Bucks, he dismantled the Knicks, he dismantled the Celtics. Like, I'm a Jimmy Butler fan. I respect Jimmy Butler and what he's been able to do. In the postseason, he's a top 5 player. In the regular season, I think he's a top 15 player. I got him better than Harden, despite what everybody says about Harden, his ability to score 45 and be a dual threat. Jimmy Butler just raises his game and has had more successes than James Harden. I will say top 15. Top 15 in the postseason, potentially top 5 player. That's just what it is. Charles Jones Jr., Wordsmith Jones, shout out. He said best NBA duels, and I want to save this for a discussion pod that hopefully I can have multiple people on, because there was a lot of duels out there. He mentioned Bird and Neek in 87, Game 7, of course, one of the best duels in NBA history. People forget Bird had such a second-half surge that people forget that Dominique Wilkins had 47 on the road and lost by 2 points in that one. I think I talked about Melo and Kobe in Game 1 in 2009 in the Western Conference Finals. I believe Dirk and there's so many games there. Dirk had a couple 50-point games against the Spurs and against the Kings and stuff like that. LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony, I believe there's a regular season game when Carmelo Anthony was in Denver. Carmelo hit the game-winning shot. There's so many duels there that need to be talked about that I think it's for a bigger conversation. Continuing here, Al Howard came in. I don't believe that these were suggestions or topics, so I don't even know if these are rule changes actually happening in the league, but I think they're being discussed. Retain timeouts after a challenge. I totally agree with that. That should be it. Goaltending, the European rule where it hits any point of the basket, actually retain. You can actually grab it or tip it up. Yes, that should be it. Maybe that will change the rebounding numbers or whatever the case may be. But as soon as it hits the rim, you should be able to grab it and knock it off. Do whatever you need to do to stop the bucket. And I think that'll be interesting to change a lot of things in the NBA, especially with scoring. But I think that's a rule that needs to happen. I've seen it in the playoffs where guys are even tipping the ball to each other anyway. So if they're able to get it off the glass as soon as it touches and touch it without it being in the rim or the circle or whatever that bullshit is, I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. Move the 3-point line out further. I'm not necessarily with that. Because then you have a Mike Bibby situation, then people are just taking long twos. That's my feel on that. I feel like guys are still shooting the ball enough. I feel like it's okay. I don't think you need to make it a trick shot contest, which everybody's afraid of, to eliminate the 3 and make guys take more mid-range shots. I'm not with that. Take the 3. Leave it where it is. Carry the ball. The next one, carry the ball. Go back to a legitimate 2 steps. Legitimate 2 steps, I think, is gone from the NBA, where Guys are so crafty with the ball, willing to try things. The society that we live in with streaming, people practicing moves. I don't think you're ever going to get back to that two-step type of game again. I don't think you're going to get there. Even though I think you should do it, that's how we play pickup. A lot of people play pickup. I don't know if we're going to get there because just the creativity, the entertainment factor of it. Now, this whole thing with the gather step and then taking 3 steps after that and then dribbling, I'm not with that. So that gather step that they have created over the past couple of years with this, you gather yourself and you're able to take another step and then go and then dribble. I'm not with that. I'm against that. No. We need to get that out the game. Carrying the ball has evolved because the first, as long as you're not literally picking up the ball like this, if you're keeping it here, that's fine. Doing that as long as you're not picking the ball up to do something like that, that's not where I'm at. Of course, people are doing that in the league. I think that needs to be tightened up. But in terms of carrying, I just don't think. I just take out that gather step. That's my main thing about that. Just take out that gather step. Moving on to Aaron Carter, who thought the in-season tournament was a good idea. Adam Silver in the league in a way to market it, make more money during the regular season. And of course, I sat there and I said, of course, the stars like LeBron, older guys like Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, guys of that nature, guys who are superstars, don't really need the in-season tournament, right? Like, I feel like this should be a way for teams, depending on what it is. I don't necessarily know what time frame it is, but I do think there's a $500,000 towards each player if they win. That helps out mainly the second half of your roster, guys who aren't getting paid. Maybe you could call a guy up for like a couple of weeks or whatever the case would be. But those games still count towards the regular season. So that's the part of it where it's like, okay, those games still count towards the regular season. How does that help, stars want to play in that? It's definitely an extra layer of emphasis, right, on the season, right? That's what they're trying to create, right, and create some type of buzz. Now, will it get competitive? I believe so, because we even seen the play-in tournament get competitive and have good games. Now, the in-season tournament, I think that's a little different. I know soccer does it. I believe college basketball does it. All these other teams do it. So there's finding ways to make it a little bit more fan-friendly, get a little bit more involvement from everybody, and get it from that standpoint. And I'm like, I'm not with it because it's just going to be a regular season game anyway. But for those guys who are bench players, guys that you can call from the G League, guys who are trying to make a roster, that can be a way to make a name for themselves, maybe get other looks from other teams around the league. There's other intriguing things for the in-season tournament that help those type of players, fringe guys, end of the role player guys, to make some money if they win, and two, make a name for themselves. There's an in-season tournament. There's somebody, they are going to crown somebody, give them somebody a championship. A trophy inside in-season tournament trophy. There is something going to be there. Those stats are going to count. So I'm not against that. I don't know what happens if a team loses and then who they face or whatever it is, or maybe they face whoever lost in another round or whatever the case may be. But I do think there's good things about it where it helps guys who are the second half of the roster, not starters, not making millions and millions and millions of dollars. It helps those guys out. For the stars and guys who want to, us who are fans watching, I don't know how it's going to see, but it's going to be basketball. It's going to be on TV, and I'm going to watch. So we'll see how it turns out. The second question: did racism cause Nikola Jokic a third MVP? I'm going to say no, but I do understand what people are saying, because once Perkins came out and basically said that NBA voters are voting because he's white, and that's the only reason why they're voting for him, they're ignoring Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo, guys of that nature, and I just felt like at that point, we were going in a different direction where it wasn't about basketball, where the MVP should be about what's on the floor, what's on the court, and what you value on the floor. Those are the first things. Now, in terms of Joker's play down the stretch, kind of maybe turned him off. I've heard people say that, reports say that, and people say he was not too happy with that whole transgression, and that kind of led to the Nuggets struggles down the stretch. Joel Embiid did play, I believe, more games. I believe he did have more wins. So, I mean, I'm going to go with that. But obviously, the Nuggets struggles down the stretch, and the Philadelphia Sixers rise, even though there was a third seed. They did rise up. They did play better than the Denver Nuggets, where Nikola Jokic was kind of leading that charge before. And towards the end of the season, it kind of dragged down a little bit. So racism, no, did not cost them, but maybe in a way it did. But I want to say no because Joel Embiid basically played better majority of the season. That's what I'm going to go with on that one. Jonathan Resende in the comments on Facebook says Miami was the number one team last year. Injuries killed them, but it's the same team. Yes, they are the same team, but in retrospect, they're still an 8 seed, right? Like they were, I think 3 minutes. I think they were down to Chicago 90-86 with 3 minutes to go. Their season was on the line, and they were about to lose to a play-in team. They were 8th seed. They lost to Atlanta in the first game. They came around, and they battled Chicago, won that game. They went on the road in Milwaukee and won that series. They went on the road in New York and won that series. Despite what everybody's saying, they didn't have home court advantage. Tyler Hero's been out. They figured out a way to get there. They figured out a way to get to that point of the 8th seed there. Moving forward here, let's see if there's anything else before I go. Let's see if there's any questions here from here. Oh, come on. Let's see if there's any live questions here. Doesn't look like it. But no, I will continue to do this over the course of the summer. Of course, with the NBA offseason coming up, I believe there will be more questions, but that was good to get that type of feedback from people getting questions and stuff like that in. Much appreciated. That will do it for this episode of the Basketball Soapbox, of course. My second time going live. Very fun to do that. But ultimately, going to continue to do this, ask more questions. Ring Takes, my wrestling podcast, which you guys can check out in the playlist on my YouTube channel. Will potentially be returning tomorrow. We got Brian out of town, so we'll see how that can circle around. A lot of stuff that's happening in wrestling in the world. The NBA Finals is continuing. We're going to continue to talk about that as well. And follow it with more basketball. I have my Portland Trailblazers. They should trade Damian Lillard video up, as well as what the Celtics should do next. The Ja Morant suspension looming, as well as NBA coaches hiring. Check those videos. I've been getting a lot of feedback on those, getting some views. So thank you again for that. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and always join me. That will do it for episode 51, NBA Finals preview of Game 3 and questions and answers. Thank you. And then until next time.